Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldron. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, February 15th, 2018. And once again, on a standard line here on the Kagro in the Morning Show, we are, of course, bringing you the morning radio show, the wacky, wild, crazy morning radio show, under the cloud of yet another mass shooting. And this time, yet another school shooting, and this time one that makes the top 10 list. By the way, bumping Columbine off of the top 10 list. Columbine high school shooting apparently no longer among the 10 deadliest mass shootings in the United States. I don't really know how to take that. It just seems like a weird and disturbing development. But things are getting worse, I guess, would be one way of putting it. I believe 3 of the deadliest mass shootings in our history have occurred on the Donald Trump watch, except, of course, he's not watching anything, which is unusual, given that he's been in office for just barely over a year. And I don't know. I don't know what to do about that, don't know what to say about that. Naturally, there's some blame to be laid at his feet, given that, well, he's complaining this morning, of course, that blah, 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 so many warning signs, mentally disturbed, etc. Some of those things did exist. There were some warning signs, although, you know, every story I read this morning interviewing the kids at the school, like anything else, half the kids say, I knew it was going to be him, and half the kids say, there were no warning signs. And, you know, it's a difficult thing to spot and be right without, you know, violating people's rights along the way. That's one of the things that makes this whole situation difficult, and maybe makes a pretty good answer, like not anybody should have those guns. Then we would have less of a problem. Well, all right, let's see. Other, I don't know, all sorts of stories being reported out of there today. Interviews with the kids. Yesterday, the internet was awash with cell phone video, and newspapers awash with screen captures of the text messages that kids at the school frantically sent to their parents in what they feared might be their last minutes alive. Lots of that, and it was very difficult to get a cell phone call out of there, and I don't think typically, you know, during lockdown drills, you know, cell phone conversations probably not recommended. We saw a lot of really interesting, I don't know what, in terms of discussion yesterday. It was a very confusing day. Lots of the cell phone video was particularly disturbing, of course, in which you could hear the shots being fired and kids kind of panicking. There was also a separate video of the police entering the classrooms one by one to clear them out and then evacuate the kids. And that one was particularly poignant, too, because the cops enter the room. The kids are, of course, in there locked down and cowering, as one might expect, with a shooter roaming around. And, I mean, I don't know how the cops could really do it any other way, but I don't know, maybe they could look into it. But, you know, to clear a room like that means barging in with an assault weapon, the very kind, as it happens, that the shooter was at that moment, or had some moments before, had been using to shoot the school up. And the solution to clearing out the school, making sure there's no second shooters, is to burst into these classrooms one at a time with an AR-15 raised up to your eye and have all the kids who are the victims of this shooting put their hands in the air. And as you can see in some of the video, some of the kids put their hands in the air. Of course, the hands are shaking. Kids are holding their cell phones, taking this video, and the cops are admonishing them to put their phones away, not because this is an improper time to be filming necessarily, but because what if the guy who's in your room right now with an AR-15, who's a good guy with a gun, but a very nervous good guy with a gun, even though he's wearing body armor and helmets and all of that stuff, he might think your cell phone is a gun. A lot of them are black. A lot of cell phone remember the days when the cell phone cases were shaped like guns? That would be a particularly bad idea in school. And I can only think about, well, not only. There's a lot of things to think about. One of the things I thought about was how much more smoothly might a clearance room by room like this go if the NRA got its way again and its solution, its so-called solution to school shootings were implemented, and cops knew that they very likely could expect or might even be guaranteed to actually encounter at least one concealed weapon in every single one of those classrooms that they enter. I don't imagine that would go very well. Somebody might have an accident. Things could get kind of crazy, especially when every time they think they're hunting for a second shooter. And that was no exception yesterday. Early reports yesterday, there might be a second shooter. No, once again, the AR-15 has fooled everybody into thinking there are multiple shooters. That's not the case. That's just a gun that can fire that many rounds that quickly. No second shooter necessary, just as it was the case in Las Vegas. 600 people mowed down. One shooter, couple of guns, one shooter. There's always rumors of a second shooter. The only thing that actually stands in common is the rumors prove to be untrue, and the guy has an AR-15. And it is always a guy. All right. Well, Greg Dworkin, no stranger to these stories either. He's with us this morning. Morning, Greg. Blank
Good
morning.
morning.
How are you?
What's new?
Nothing. I don't know. The president is shocked and disturbed. Lots of people have some weird reactions. Pam Bondi, I noticed.
I want a president who's capable of crying.
Yeah, he's had his tear ducts removed, I think, or they're stretched out.
Well, that's probably why he couldn't get into the army, in Vietnam. He had tear duct spurs.
Right, I guess so. He has finally tweeted something this morning and announced plans.
Totally inappropriate. You want to read it?
Yeah. I don't know if I even have it at hand, but basically, so many warning signs kind of thing. What was it? What did he say?
No, he was blaming the students basically for not reporting things.
Oh yeah, is that it? Yeah, okay. Well, you're supposed to pick these kids out and do something. And there were a lot of indications out there too, but
there were. In fact, there were like specific indications.
Yeah.
There was one where he posted a very, I guess, inappropriate video. I didn't see the video, but there was a YouTube video that he posted, and then he had a comment underneath that said something along the lines of, "I'm training to be a professional school shooter."
Yes.
And that comment was reported to the FBI.
It was.
Apparently, and this happened anyway. Apparently.
Yeah, well, I mean, quite honestly, you report that to the FBI.
I guess they were still working on his interim security clearance.
Maybe that was it. I mean, that's what struck me was he's complaining about, all the signs are there. You got 130, we're up to 130 now, 130 plus total security question marks roaming the White House. Come on, authorities, get on the stick. Why don't you do something and prevent the tragedy? So, I don't know. Doesn't do the job at home. Although I noticed you also picked up on the fact that he has graciously let it be known that maybe while he's down at Mar-a-Lago, while I'm in Florida anyway.
Yeah, when it's convenient for me, I might stop by. Maybe
school.
I'll think of what to say by then.
Let's see. Yeah, don't call me between 8 and 12 or 9 and 1.
I got to check on the timeshare stuff, though. I'm not really sure when I can get down there.
Right. I'm having meetings.
I share Mar-a-Lago with the federal government, and I just have to check out and see what the schedule is.
Right. Oh, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But between 9 and 1, I'm having meetings and wearing golf clothes.
Right. So he's 3 tweets this morning.
Yeah. Oh, 3. He's up to 3. Wow.
Well, last night he said, just spoke to Governor Rick Scott. We're working closely with law enforcement on terrible Florida school shooting.
Oh, yeah. Right. I did notice that one. And that's a good one. Although, what work were you doing? The guy had already been arrested.
So many signs that, you want to identify who he is and where he got the gun. So many signs that the Florida shooter was mentally disturbed, even expelled from school for bad and erratic behavior. Neighbors and classmates knew he was a big problem, must always report such instances to authorities again and again. That is not the solution to this. He was reported. Having a cop in the school isn't the solution. There was a cop in the school. Training the kids how to properly, for want of a better word, hide and cower. doesn't prevent all of this stuff, especially if you have somebody who's insistent on pulling fire alarms and getting them all out where he could shoot them easier. And then his last tweet was, my prayers and condolences to the families of the victims of the terrible Florida shooting. No child, teacher, or anyone else should ever feel unsafe in an American school. I agree with that, but what are you doing about it? Michael Skolnick tweeted this morning, I think this is always worth emphasizing. Thank you to all the courageous teachers and educators who have to go to work today, truly praying that another young person does not shoot up another school somewhere. In America, you are heroes. You are, they are. I remember the Sandy Hook, teachers who basically put their bodies between them and the 6-year-olds they were protecting. That happened in Florida as well. A fellow named Aaron Feist, who's a football coach and security guard, was killed stepping in front of the bullets to try to shield the kids. Mm-hmm. And they are heroes. You are heroes. Or in my house, as we like to call them, union thugs.
Ah, yes.
I say that with affection. My late mom, was a union organizer for the AFT. I don't think that when other people use the term union thugs to describe teachers, they're using it in quite the affectionate way that I do. But, I think of them that way, and they are heroes every day.
They are. Although
and they shouldn't have to be.
True. I do want to point out, though, I mean, again, since we're on AR-15 as a subject, stepping in front of people to shield them from AR-15 rounds, it's a nice thought. It doesn't do a great deal, to be honest with you.
It hides, this is a big guy, so it hides the victims from the shooter, maybe for a moment, letting them scramble away. It doesn't stop the bullet.
No, it doesn't. In fact, we've got an interesting report on hand that the Huffington Post put together, looking at the autopsy reports from Las Vegas.
Yes, I saw that one.
It's worth reviewing, but not right now.
And there are other things that are worth reviewing that you can find in various and sundry places, and reignites the debate. Nothing happened after Las Vegas, and of course nothing happened after Newtown nationally, and nothing happened after this one and that one, and maybe nothing will happen after
Pulse, right?
Florida again. But, or as Craig Pittman from the Tampa Bay Times calls it, the gunshine state. If you have these sorts of episodes, is it time to start thinking about putting the graphic images of how you get blown away out there so the public can see it? Is that what it's going to take to sicken people so that they actually do something?
It's a thought.
It's a problem. I mean, I know that from the Newtown experience because the parents of the kids don't necessarily want that. And what do you do? I see people calling for it. It's an easy thing to say when it's not your family. I just bring up the other side of it because been there, done that. Yeah, no,
it's an excellent point. No one doubts your position on this or your experience with it.
And so it's not mine. So. It's the parents. I mean, if they said, I'm fine with it. But, it's up to them.
That's a very difficult decision to make. By the way, I do think that would prompt action. It would prompt action to ban photos like that or make it that much more difficult to print them. That
would be the Republican response. Yes. Now you can't show these photos anymore. We're going to pass a law.
Yeah.
Because all right-thinking people don't really want everybody else to see these things.
Right.
And the NRA would back that, so it would pass.
Yeah, pretty much.
So Maggie Jordan tweets, reminder, 1 year ago this month, the Republican-controlled House and Senate repealed an Obama administration gun regulation that prevented certain individuals with mental health conditions from buying firearms. Trump signed the bill. The NRA applauded the action for reversing an unconstitutional gun grab. So when Trump talks about there are signs that Florida shooter was mentally disturbed, well, you did the exact opposite thing to help protect people in that circumstance. Don't be yelling at the students. The kid wasn't a student at the school anymore. But there was something on the books that may, if not in this particular case, may have helped something else. As soon as he turned 18, he legally went and bought the gun.
Yeah.
But, if we knew he was mentally ill, would your repeal of this particular regulation that the NRA told you to do and you willingly went along with, would that have helped? We don't know yet. We don't have enough information. But, not doing anything and not saying anything because we don't have enough information is the fallback. Rick Scott and Donald Trump have both basically said, it's too soon, of course, to talk about these things. We don't have all the facts. And when there's a shooting, 3 times a week, you're never going to have enough It's always going to be too soon. You're never going to have enough of all the facts. I think, it's high time that people just realized if you want something done, you're going to have to do it yourself, and you can go ahead and vote these jerks out of office. Now, here's a Florida school shooting witness. You were talking about the tweets and the videos and such. They're being interviewed this morning, the survivors, and they're amazing. And one kid says, this is something that we can't let keep happening, because if we do and we get used to it, it's going to happen again. This is a time for our country to take a look in the mirror and realize there's a serious issue here. In other words, you got kids who are way, way, way smarter than their grandparents and parents. Here's another one. I heard the gunshots, and I've heard the shooter walk down the hallway shooting more kids. I heard a young man crying for his mother dying. And the next guest, Representative Ted Deutsch, said he spoke to these students off camera right before they swapped spots on the interview site, and they said to him, "We want action."
Yeah.
And so you're going to have an opportunity to take some action yourself this November. And you have to get out there and vote, and you have to get out there and vote for people who will support doing something. Just like immigration and DACA, it's the only way that anything's going to get done. It's a hard lesson, and you're going to have to wait, but you have to get out and do what you need to do come November. Otherwise, stop complaining about it.
Yeah, I don't know how else to sum it up, other than to put all that out there. It's just particularly galling watching the president fumbling for something non-controversial to tweet, and tweeting, "Why did I do that thing? The first thing I did was get rid of the one regulation that could possibly have done something in this case, and I'm so mad about whoever did that." Okay.
And Rick Scott is on the spot, and by the way, he's going to be running for Senate, I presume.
Oh, okay.
So, he's going to have to answer for this as well. And yeah, you got to hold these folks accountable, and putting it off and saying it's too soon and, there's nothing you can do, that's wrong. So you got to get out and do something about it.
Thankfully,
I have a piece here that I unfortunately wrote 3 years ago for Charleston. Lessons passed along from Newtown to Charleston. I've read it on the show a few times. Brief list of things, practical and philosophical, I didn't know until I needed to know. And refers to Charlotte, but it could be Parkland, it could be, any of these places, Las Vegas, Pulse nightclub, any of these places. The dignity of ordinary people in Charleston will break your heart. You're not human if it doesn't. But when the shock passes, anger will replace it. Do not let it overwhelm you. It will need to be dealt with. The good people of Charleston, used to volunteering, will be the city and the people's best friend. Use them wisely. Don't burn them out, in other words. And then families and church members. Everybody knows somebody in a place like Charleston. I'm sure that's true in Parkland. Everybody's in pain. Dan Malloy has some experience with this. And Rick Scott said, it's not clear what to do, he said. Why don't you call Dan Malloy? That's an easy call to make. He'll give you some advice about what to do. He was there. There's a really, really poignant piece I came across, I don't have it at my fingertips, about a guy who was outside the room
I think I saw the same
one.
one.
Had to go and tell the people in Sandy Hook that if your kid hasn't been reunited with you yet, it was late in the day after the shooting happened, first thing in the morning. If you haven't been reunited with your kids by now, you're not going to be. And then hearing the cries and wails from the parents when he said that. And then him sitting by himself afterwards. The hardest thing anybody would ever have to do. And as much as he's unpopular for his tax plan and other things like that in Connecticut, he did that. And it was an amazing thing to do. And so why am I bringing that up now? Rick Scott could call Dan Malloy and get some practical experience in terms of what to do. Donald Trump could call Dan Malloy and get some practical experience in what to do. And one of the debates I see on Twitter is Trump didn't say anything yet until this morning. And maybe he shouldn't, because he's not very good at this, and
no.
I don't want to hear from him.
That's true. But I mean,
somebody may well have written his tweet. It was still awful this morning. Well, it was terrible.
He's certainly damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. But that's the job. And
well, consoler in chief is something he's not very good at, just like he's not very good at the rest of president.
Right. Pretty much all of it is not a strong suit. Rick Scott, of course, could have called Malloy, but could have called him after Pulse. I mean, one of the things I noticed about Rick Scott's response to this was people pulling out his response to the Pulse shooting and saying, which was, boy, gee whiz, you see something like this and you just think, what can you do about preventing it next time? And golly, we're going to have that conversation. And golly, they didn't have it. And he's now having to do his press conference after his second gigantic national headline mass shooting. And wow, what happened to what you said after Pulse? Oh yeah, I forgot about that. It faded from memory very quickly because I don't actually care, and I really think there should be more of them.
Unlike in Connecticut, down there in the Gunshine State, they didn't do anything. So here's some other observations from that Storify that I made 3 years ago. Charleston needs complete transparency and help in planning how to distribute gifts and funds for survivors. Here's what happens. And again, I say this from firsthand experience.
Yeah.
People will feel terrible for you. It's kids. They'll send gifts. They'll send money. They'll send things you don't want. And then the town is going to have a warehouse full of things they didn't ask for. And maybe, sometimes this happens. People mean well, but it'll be religious tracts on a religion you don't necessarily subscribe to, advice that you don't necessarily want to take, not easy to distribute because, maybe somebody has some other religion with different ideas about how to do that. There's going to be a whole lot of teddy bears. There's going to be backpacks. There's going to be bikes. There's going to be things that people send that are impossible to distribute and you don't know what to do with. So the town's going to have to figure out in advance where to put all this stuff and how to figure it out. There are organizations, from volunteers from the Seventh-day Adventists. There's other people who plan for disaster sorting and stuff who can help you. And, just get an idea in advance before you get overwhelmed by it in terms of what to do with it. You're also going to have competing offers of help for organizations and institutions, including mental health assistance. And the town is going to need a dedicated coordinator to try to sort all this stuff out. And you can expect that everybody in that town is going to be in a mental fog for weeks. Expect it, but people are going to come out of it at different times. And it's really jolting. Like when you're out of it, but the person you're talking to isn't, or vice versa. And, it's just, it makes it very difficult. What do I say? What do I do? How do I react? What if I just want to cry? What if I just want to hug? And the other person is either not there yet or already been past that. And it just, it's like talking to somebody in a conversation with a 10-second delay, and you're trying and you're making words and you're doing the normal things humans do, and for some reason it's just off. It's not clicking. So you have to expect that, and that'll work itself out as well. But the town will need, and the school will need, enhanced mental health services for years to come. And somebody's going to have to pay for that. And sometimes it's grant money, but then it runs out. And sometimes you don't get the money. Yeah. And Rick Scott is the governor, and that's his responsibility. And he better get on it now. Because I don't know that he did anything after Pulse, but this is kids. Yeah. And you better get on it now.
Well, we'll see whether they do or not. They're
just
scrambling for things.
Again, from experience, I hate to say. So what happens when the next freshman class comes into that school who hasn't been there before and they walk into the school? Is it going to be open? Are they going to keep the school? We got rid of our school. There's things that you have to plan for in terms of how you're going to deal with this. And we didn't just get a new school. It takes a while to build a new school. So we moved all the kids to another school. So they didn't have to go back into that school ever. Of course, they were 6 years old. But nonetheless, kids are kids. And what do you do with the next crop coming up? And so, start planning now, folks, because you can't just do this overnight. And if Rick Scott's going to just throw his hands up and say, well, there's nothing we can do, that planning won't get done. And that is a tragedy that you are responsible for, Governor.
Now, there are authorities there who are trying, I think they're trying to think of something to do, but it's coming out weird because they got no plan. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of Florida, for some reason has come out with a statement in which she says that the state, I don't know that she has the authority to say this, but the state will pay for the funeral expenses of the victims, which... I certainly when she said it, she thought she was doing something very, caring and nice for the for the people. But I mean, that is some pretty hollow stuff too. Well, you got to do something. Well, how about this? Big government will pay for the funerals. That's the response to mass shootings.
I just want you to know, our heart grieves for everybody, and I just want you to know that the state's going to send a condolence card to every single person who was involved.
Yeah, I mean,
thank
that
you,
would even actually be a better idea than
And we'll also
saying,
send you a blender.
Right.
From the old.
But this is the response. Like, well, really, we have to do something about these school shootings. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll bury the kids. No cost to you. Or buy one, get one. How about that?
So as the break starts to come over, we're not quite there yet, but I have 3 written pieces that I think are of note, and I may not get to them, but maybe you will if you want to. One is, I agree, is probably one of the best things written about the gun problem here by Gary Wills from a few years ago. It's called Our Moloch, and it's about, first Moloch, horrid king, be smeared with blood of human sacrifice and parents' tears. Though for the noise of drums and timbrels loud, their children's cries unheard that pass through fire to his grim idol. That's from Paradise Lost. And it's about the sacrifice to the bloodthirsty god, king. And is that what our guns are? Do we make these sacrifices? It's really a wonderful piece as the break comes up. And the other is The Problem is Guns, and that's by Ryan Cooper from this year's edition, this week's edition of The Week. And then finally, John Rausch and Ben Wittes wrote, Boycott the Republican Party. If conservatives want to save the GOP from itself, they need to vote mindlessly and mechanically against its nominees. They have another reason. But the graphic on that piece from a week ago is really poignant now, because it's a Republican elephant whose tusk is piercing a red United States of America.
Pretty amazing. Well, we'll take our break and come back to it after this. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show on Netroots Radio. We, may be talking about it all day long, still on the Florida school shooting. But I don't know. I mean, are we close to, what else do we add to this? It was a very, I think we've rounded up most of the various reactions. I'm still sort of agog at Pam Bondi offering to pay for funerals, which is just sort of a terrible offer to make, really, when you get right down to it. And the fact that she may actually end up rescinding that offer because you don't have that authority, and that isn't really something the state wants to be involved in, and people may or may not want that assistance. But if you end up having to rescind that, imagine, going through the awkwardness of having that be the official state response. Should we put guns in the classroom? Should we put more cops? Should we do some mental health things? I don't know, all kind of difficult. How about we'll clean up. We'll bury everybody who gets shot. And, if it's no cost to you, in other words, what's the difference? 10, 15, 20 people shot in a single incident. The point is they'll be buried at no cost to you. And then if you have to, at the end, say, made a mistake about that one. You're on the hook with that. However, thoughts and prayers, that's good. That's going to make things exceptionally awkward.
Yep. So, it's just remarkable. And I'm going to, I had a whole other folder of in other news to talk about today.
Yes.
I don't feel like it.
All right. I mean, there is others, and I'm sure we'll pick up on it, but I won't.
Right.
Certainly don't want to make you do it.
Is you got a 2-hour show, so I'm going to send some of those links over to you when we're done. So at least you'll have some stuff to talk about. But It's hard to focus on anything else right now except all this stuff. And one observation I have to make, of course, there is this FBI investigation going on about how Russian money gets to the NRA.
Yes.
And the other observation is that when you are a pro-gun, anti-gun safety politician,
yes,
your list of things that you can say to look compassionate becomes extremely limited.
True.
Because you can't say anything that is like, okay, thank you, I understand, we're going to do something about it. You can't. So it's like, give me the list of things that are non-gun related that I could say to show that I'm compassionate. Well, I'll pay for the funeral. We'll send you a state-sponsored condolence card.
Mm-hmm.
We will, I don't know. We'll do something. We'll do something for you. We'll mention your name in a speech. We'll do a whole bunch of things to show, like, it's like the old George H.W. Bush memo, I care.
Right.
Remember that?
Yes, I do. That was unusually stilted and weird. Okay.
It's stilted and weird when you have to somehow, you have to be compassionate and you don't know how.
Yeah.
That's why it's going to be, unfortunately, painfully fascinating to watch and see what Trump actually says. Because if he goes on and starts blaming grieving classmates for not stopping the Florida shooter, as Oliver Willis points out, it's not going to go over well.
Right. And it didn't go over well the last time around when they were saying students. I recall the calls for where are the big sixth graders could have done something about this, or maybe your thicker textbooks are a good idea.
Yeah, well, these were high school kids, so I don't know.
They had the big guys. The coach, did something, like as you mentioned. Also, people mentioning that a lot of times the calls are for, I did see this one go out, we need to harden our schools, like harden as in like a bunker. There need to be, the answer is bulletproof whiteboards and
you can do all of those
backpack materials, yes.
And then you set the fire alarm off and everybody comes into the hallway and you shoot them.
Yes, that was a good point that you brought that up. And I guess this is where you can remind people, this was a former student of this school. He's been through their lockdown drills.
Yeah.
It's no secret to the shooter, and obviously, really honestly, a stranger shooter, not really going to be confused likely by lockdown drills, but this one has been through it. And also, I did hear some reports of people being hit by rounds. Again, AR-15, pretty powerful weapon, hit by rounds that came through the walls. So when you were locked in your room and hoping against hope that the shooter didn't show up and try to force the door open, he just shot through I don't think he intentionally shot through the walls. There were just some stray bullets, but people got hit through the walls and then, of course, had to stay locked in place. Got to wait here. Everybody, I don't know, I think I remember from health class, put pressure on it and, let's wait. I don't know what else they're going to do in that situation, but you can't even hide in the classrooms.
Right.
There's no
and then, somebody pointed out, Parker Malloy pointed out on Twitter, the tweets from Mike Rogers, Representative Mike Rogers, Alabama. On the one hand, he says, as a father of three, I want to say thank you, real Donald Trump, for the Trump administration reversing the trans bathroom order. But when it comes to a shooting, our thoughts and prayers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And Parker Malloy writes, kind of amazing which of these two issues the congressman thought the government needed to act on to ensure his children's safety.
Yeah, good point.
So you have all of that. All right, well, I'm going to leave you. I'm going to leave you with things like Jared Kushner's credit line debt's increasing, making him more and more a susceptibility to blackmail, but he's got this clearance thing. Mm-hmm. I'm going to leave you with Kate Shaw reviewing what it means to have interim clearance. Because she's an expert, and it's kind of helpful to understand all that stuff. When you're ready for it, maybe second half of the show, or as soon as you want to get off this topic in other news, you can look at those things. Maybe now. Let's see what else we have for you that you could do that. You remember our show yesterday? We were talking about the fact that Donald Trump might be soon replacing John Kelly with other people.
Oh, yes, all right.
And we mentioned three people, Gary Cohn and Mick Mulvaney and
Hulk Hogan, I think.
Hulk Hogan, right, exactly. So this is from Allah Pundit, Hot Air. It's interesting because there's a whole bunch of other names here. This claims it's already been offered to Gary Cohn, who's deciding what to do about it.
Tom Brady.
Chris Christie, Gary Lewandowski, and then a whole bunch of people you never heard of. Lobbyist David Urban, Kevin McCarthy we talked about. He's on the list, but there's a bunch of other folks, and so it's kind of interesting to go through the list and say, who would be acceptable to the Trump administration, and who are these people?
Yeah, that is a good question. Any Russians?
Well, I think speaking Russian is a plus here. Let's see what else we got. We got why a tech journalist like Quinn Norton might think it's fine to be friends with Weave, who is the Nazi. This is actually a very, very good piece.
Oh, yeah, okay. I mean, it's a hot story.
Culture. It's a hot story,
and
so
I have ignored it.
Too. Yeah.
Because I don't know who Quinn Norton is.
Well, you didn't have a chance to because she never got to be on the New York Times the way they intended. So it's an interesting piece. You might find, a good read.
Yeah.
And let's see what else we have here.
Mostly I want to know why they would have put her on that without the Nazi thing.
Right.
Like, why you? Why not me?
Oh, I found the piece about John McKinney standing outside of Dan Malloy's place.
Okay.
That was from Ted Mann. And let's see what else I could find for you. I'm just playing producer on the air live.
Yeah, everyone listen.
So while everybody's listening, we have Trump's budget would cut the social safety net.
Yes, true.
And
Obviously.
that's a good piece by Charles Pierce, because everything Charles Pierce writes is always good. I'll leave you with that.
All right.
And,
I mean, you can just keep clicking and typing for an hour.
Yeah, I don't have to be reading it on the air while I do that. So I'll go, and I'll get ready to go off to work, and I'll be back on Monday. Hopefully things will be a little more settled by then. But, it's a bad day in America, and it'll be a worse day if we decide not to do anything about it. My advice is there's certain things you could think of that might help in regard to legislation, but the main practical thing that you could do is pick your candidate in your local area, help them win, and make sure to go out and vote in November.
Okay. That's all we can do at the moment. I think you're right. Okay, well, I appreciate the help in getting off to a stable start for a difficult morning. And, hey, have a good weekend. It's a holiday weekend for a lot of people coming up. I think we'll make it back here on the air for Monday. Probably everybody in my house who's off from work and school won't be awake yet anyway.
Yeah, so it goes. So take care, and you're getting awfully good at this, post-tragedy show doing here.
Yes.
Professionals are the ones that go to work even though, and all of that.
They get paid.
Take care, and I'll talk to you on Monday.
Okay. Thanks very much, Craig. Here is a remarkable fact, so labeled, from Armando, who sends Sarah Kenzier's note on Twitter. I'm going to have to open it up. Not all of the text is displayed here. If you are 7 years old, I do feel that way sometimes, but if you are actually 7 years old, get off Twitter. 60% of the deadliest mass shootings in modern U.S. history happened during your lifetime. That's basically it. Embedding the tweet of Daniel Nass, visual journalist from Team Trace, that is the Trace being the publication of, I believe, of Everytown for gun safety, but one of the gun safety organizations out there that has a social media presence. Largely, they do a lot of work similar to, what I've been doing with gun fail and other things, but of course covering a much broader spectrum of the gun problem. So Daniel Nass had this tweet. He says, I've updated this Team Trace graphic 3 times in the past 5 months. The graphic, of course, being a display of the deadliest mass shootings in modern U.S. history. So, I don't know, I guess we'll share that with you, but in case you were wondering, Las Vegas now stands atop the list. The second one on the list was the Pulse shooting in Orlando, Florida, 2016, presided over by the same Rick Scott that still doesn't know what to do this time around. And I guess, by the way, would you like to take a brief tour of the locations that we're talking about? It's Las Vegas, Nevada. See if you see a pattern here in terms of like gun enthusiasm in those states. There are some anomalies. Nevada, Florida, Virginia, Connecticut, of course, Newtown, standing at number 4 on the list. Texas, California, Florida, California, Oklahoma, Edmond, Oklahoma, 1986. The original modern era school shooting kickoff, I suppose. And like I mentioned, Columbine doesn't actually make the list at this point. So there you have it. And again, I'm reminded from this situation and dealing with it yesterday. I guess one of the better public policy silver linings of the whole thing. There's no policy silver lining because we don't change any policies for the most part. We do here and there. And by the way, of that list, Nevada, Florida, Virginia, Connecticut, Texas, California, Oklahoma, really the only one, well, I don't know what California has done, but really the only one that's tightened gun laws in response, even minimally, to the tragedy they had happen within their borders is Connecticut. The response everywhere else has been loosen it. Let's have more people with more guns, and that'll solve the problem. And maybe that has something to do with the fact that some of these states appear multiple times on the list, and Connecticut doesn't. On the other hand, if California did in fact act to tighten its gun laws, then I suppose that would be a counterpoint, although they do appear closer to the bottom of the list. Anyway, it's just out there, and I am reminded that we no longer have people who are ostensibly on whatever our side, quote unquote our side, whatever our side is, telling us that it's too soon to say anything. Remember that was actually, that was a place where very serious people on our side took refuge after a mass shooting for a long time. And I mean aggressively so. My recollection, I was reminded by myself yesterday, I reminded myself that I was admonished, screamed at, dismissed as disgusting and ghoulish and in a fit of petty pique, blocked by our own hero of the resistance, Keith Olbermann, for saying that there was really no reason to wait on it, and there really wasn't anything such thing as too soon to discuss the gun issue after the Aurora, Colorado movie theater shooting. You remember, during the Batman movie. At that point, we were still stuck, I guess, what was that, 2012? Still stuck in too soon mode, I think. Maybe I don't even remember when that happened. But, it was for me, famous exchange. Not for anybody else. Nobody else remembers it, and Keith Olbermann almost certainly doesn't either. But, he was hot on my trail for quite a while, like, you need to calm down. Today is for mourning, and you need to back off. And no. Too much of this happening for us to be backing off or to be pushed into a corner by people on our own side on this. There's no such thing as too soon anymore. That's long gone. No, and by the way, the exchange ended with, "You're finished here." And then a big blockage because I was getting so much of my information from Keith Olbermann. I needed to have his feed. I wasn't following him anyway, but it certainly didn't make much difference in my feed. But now I was blocked. Couldn't find the pearls of wisdom from Keith Olbermann expressing his sorrow over these things and waiting a day. And now, by the way, he's one of the first ones out of the box. Been zero acknowledgement, by the way, from him on that. And quite frankly, I couldn't care less whether it ever comes, because that guy's kind of dead to me, and I was never really particularly interested in him anyway, so it's no big loss from a personal standpoint. But why make this about me? I can stop on that now. I just find that, that is a personal note, but I'm rather irritated about that people who are big heroes of the stand up for what's right and resistance and whatnot, who spent their time when it mattered being the voice of the left, telling the rest of the left, please adopt the right's stance on this so that we can cower and do nothing for longer and there could be more massacres before we finally realize that this isn't getting us anywhere, and these idiots are never going to give us any credit for backing off and giving room to them to cuddle their guns after one of these massacres. So thanks very much. I'm motivated by that. I'll move on for the moment. Lots of other things, as we mentioned, worth considering. I am going to probably be on this topic for just a little while longer as I scroll back and take a look at what was going on. Yes, various bits and pieces of the news that I saw and passed on Twitter yesterday. The shooter, it was in fact pictured on his Instagram account wearing his Make America Great Again hat. There are reports from kids on the ground there in Florida who said, yeah, I've seen him wear it to school. He used to come in with, the ultra right-wing T-shirts, which still, unfortunately, the kids have no words to describe other than calling them patriotic T-shirts, even though the fact is that the T-shirts espoused hatred against Muslims, which is not patriotic in any sense whatsoever. But that's the frame that we're handed, and sometimes, I guess, if you're a kid or just, in shock because your school has just been shot up, you default to that. And big party in the minds of Republicans everywhere, that they have managed to make it such that your natural fallback position is to call that sort of racism, xenophobia, and hatred patriotism. It's not your fault, kids. I just want to put out there that, everybody apparently saw him walking around in this garbage. And, of course, posting online that he was going to be a professional school shooter, etc., etc. All those warning signs were there. Now, of course, his Instagram account also somehow, or whatever, his online postings somehow revealed that he was allegedly, or was calling himself anyway, declaring himself to be a registered Democrat. And so the Make America Great Again alt-right are, of course, out there trying to explain away all of this by saying, well, he's a Democrat, you see. And I've even seen, don't let the Make America Great Again hat fool you. He was a registered Democrat, which is, pretty weak sauce as a response. I mean, if it's out there, it's out there. If it's true, we don't know whether it is or not. Make what you will of it. I will just tell you, whatever you make of it is wrong. And hasn't the president been out there bragging that he's so fantastic that even Democrats would cross the line and vote for him? If you're a personal fan of Donald Trump, it's really, I think, it seems to me a little bit more damaging to find out that the guy is a personal devotee of the cult of Trump than to find out that he's at one point inexplicably chosen one versus the other of the two broadest possible mainstream political parties that are out there, even though one of them no longer adheres to anything close to the mainstream. But, okay, you're a Democrat? Great. Who'd you vote for? Donald Trump. He's the best. Oh, well, don't let that fool you. He's registered a different way. I won't let it fool me too much. Thanks. Anyway, let's see. Much more happening out there. As I mentioned, Pam Bondi's response, which was kind of weird, and the response to the response from NYC Southpaw, I thought was also revealing. I think there's some audio here, but I think it's muted. Pam Bondi saying, we will pay for the funeral expenses of these poor victims and do everything we can to help families. The state of Florida, we will pay for counseling. Now, that's probably helpful. For the surviving victims, we will pay for students who need counseling. They're going to end up, I think, having to rescind the offer for funerals. But that was just sort of a bizarre offer to make. And Southpaw, I think, had a good point. He says, I got lots of questions about this statement. Why is she talking like a guilty person? That's a good point, Joe. Does she even have the authority to spend taxpayer funds like this? There may be authority to do it, and there may be authority certainly to pay for counseling. I don't know about funerals. I don't know that the Attorney General is the person who makes that authorization, but she wanted to say something, I guess, and she said something dumb as a result. Is this Florida's policy response? We won't do anything to stop these threats to our kids, but the state will pay for the funerals. All right, well, it's a way to respond. I don't really know what to say about that. What else? I mean, I think we could probably move on from this point. Except I did want to say that or mention that there was this other piece here. I made mention of it from the Huffington Post. I have the tweet of Nick Wing of the Huffington Post, or the Huff Post. Do they call it the Huff Post now? That reads, so Matt Ferner and I have spent the last week looking through the autopsies of victims of the Las Vegas shooting. After today's tragedy, we think they're more important than ever. And the piece, probably also just as important, titled, Las Vegas Autopsies Reveal the True Brutality of Mass Shootings. This was sort of get to the point of whether or not do we need to see the injuries or have some description, something maybe to kind of show us what's really going on here and what is the real danger of these of the weapons. And man, I mean, it's a longish piece, and you should see it. Of course, I'll include it in the roundup. Scott will give it to you. And there's in particular an embedded video, a GIF of an AR-15 round being fired into what they call ballistic gel. It's, you know, it's a block, a big giant block of, well, gel, and it's transparent to a point, translucent, let's say. And the stuff is of a consistency that I guess it is meant to be used, you know, for research purposes to mimic human flesh so that you can see from the side in slow motion video what happens inside of a human body when it's hit by a bullet, and by different bullets. You know, you can show the difference between getting hit by a .22 or, you know, any of the handgun versus these high velocity rounds like the AR-15 might fire. And, well, obviously that will show you just how damaging the AR-15 round can be. And the first couple lead paragraphs, I think, will give you some idea of what we're talking about without getting too far into it and putting too much time in on a pretty sensitive write-up. But you should absolutely take some time on your own to review it. It begins this way. The bullet, this is on a report, again, from the Las Vegas shootings, carried out with an AR-15. The bullet struck the woman's right forearm, passing cleanly through the flesh below her wrist and exiting the other side. The round was tumbling now, but still carrying enough force to re-enter her arm, lower down this time, before exiting again and plunging into her chest. The lead projectile then burst through her liver, finally coming to rest in the first lumbar vertebra of her lower back. Her death, described by a medical examiner, was determined to be a homicide. The unnamed woman was one of 58 victims killed by a lone gunman at a country music concert on the Las Vegas Strip on October 1st, the deadliest mass shooting in modern U.S. history. And a little bit of methodology here. HuffPost obtained autopsies for each of the 58 victims. The reports released by the Clark County, Nevada Coroner's Office earlier this month offer a raw account of the power of civilian weaponry and the damage it inflicts on human bodies, even when the gunman appears to have no particular firearms expertise. In other words, off the shelf, no training, you can have a handheld instant death machine that can really deal it out. They describe catastrophic injuries, most the result of single rounds striking from a range of nearly 500 yards. Do keep that in mind as well. Details of carnage, thanks for the word there, Donald Trump, that we tend to shy away from in media coverage. After a mass shooting, news stories often reduce victims to parts of a larger body count. The latest casualties of this particularly American form of gun violence. Just look at the headlines for the school shooting in Florida on Wednesday. Mass casualty shooting at Florida school. Other coverage focused exclusively on honoring slain individuals, a celebration of life that seeks to underscore the tragedy of a mass shooting, certainly a necessary part of recovery. But both types of stories can obscure and desensitize us to the disturbing violence. The autopsies, on the other hand, give an unsanitized truth to these stories. Among the victims in Las Vegas were 36 women and 22 men. 51 were killed by a single shot. That's kind of important. It wasn't because he was a marksman and was picking them off one by one with headshots. It's just one round from an AR-15 travels so fast and carries such power that it can tear you apart even from 500 yards away, no matter where it hits you. That's, I guess, the important thing that I would like to convey in all this, that this report gives us the opportunity to talk about. 7 of the dead were hit by multiple rounds. 34 suffered fatal gunshot wounds to the body, while 21 were struck in the head or neck, and 3 struck in their extremities. So we're talking about people hit in their extremities, but hit so badly that they died. In addition, 851 people were injured in the attack, including 422 who suffered non-fatal wounds from gunfire. That is a pretty mass casualty event, really. I don't think I've ever seen the 800 number before. With bullets exiting the shooter's weapon at a velocity of about 3,000 feet per second, about 3 times as fast as a bullet fired out of a handgun, by the way, and spinning at thousands of revolutions per second, the consequences for anyone hit directly were dire. You got a relatively small cross-sectional area with a tremendous amount of kinetic energy lined up behind it, so the shot just penetrates, said Arthur Alphin, a ballistics expert and former West Point professor who's testified in a number of multiple shooting cases. We'll hear more about it after this break. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, dealing with the unfortunate fact that we're, again, broadcasting under the cloud of a mass shooting event and reporting now on the results of the last mass shooting event, or at least one of the last couple shooting events. The HuffPost report on the autopsies of those killed in the Las Vegas attack. And already we've gone on a little bit longer than I thought. But my recollection of reading the first half of the article was that there was really some, I don't know what you would say, solid takeaway background information that just sort of will put you in the right mode of thinking for, what are we really talking about here? And maybe get a sense for whether you want to evaluate, what needs to be passed on, what needs to be reported or shown from a mass shooting like this. I guess the thought is, everybody who died probably was, hit in the head and killed instantly, and that's not the case. And there is a significant difference between what a handgun can do and what an AR-15 can do, particularly from a great distance, but even without a great deal of distance between shooter and victim, this gives you a sense of how powerful these weapons are, and I guess helps explain why it is that the damage done from these mass shootings seems to be on the increase, and why so many of the most deadly ones are happening in the last couple of months, are happening now, and why they're knocking other older ones off the list. I mean, it's not exclusively the case that the most deadly shootings are the result of the use of AR-15s, but the list is growing, and it's definitely, very definitely the weapon of choice for mass, planned mass shootings. There's just nothing that compares. Anyway, as we left off, we were reading about the technical reasons why AR-15s can cause so much damage. Muzzle velocity of 3,000 feet per second, 3 times as fast as a bullet fired out of a handgun. But if the point is to make a hole in you, what's the difference, right? Well, it makes a different kind of hole. Spinning at thousands of revolutions per second, which means it can bore through the first point of impact pretty easily, and why, for instance, shielding the bodies of others with your own body, as brave as it is, doesn't really always have the desired effect. I don't know what else to tell you. If you're of the mind that you can and should shield someone else, I can't tell you not to. I certainly wouldn't tell you, well, the odds are that it's not going to do any good anyway. I'm not going to tell you that. Go ahead, do what you think you got to do, and don't not do it because I'm giving you the science here. I want you to know, once it's you against an AR-15, it's kind of hopeless, and I don't want anybody to come away with the impression, as we did after Sandy Hook, for instance, that a husky sixth grader could protect you, or even that a football coach could, oh, I'm saved. The football coach is going to throw himself in front of me. I am glad that he did that. It's selfless and amazing. But I guess what I'm saying is the easy access to guns like the AR-15 render acts of heroism like that, in some cases, useless. And I think we should feel bad about that. That even a person who will do something, who will commit themselves to such a selfless act, can't get that last wish that they wanted to save another life. And maybe it did save somebody. I don't know. It's just these are weapons that are designed to render heroic measures useless, and maybe we shouldn't distribute them so widely, is what I'm getting at. So, as the doctor here, or the ballistics expert, I guess, the professor at West Point, former professor, was pointing out, these are extraordinarily powerful weapons, and he's testified in a number of multiple shooting cases because of his expertise. The autopsies, to return to the article, describe bullets carving through flesh, leaving massive trauma in their wake. Again, you should see this ballistic gel being hit. I mean, talk about massive trauma. It's the damaged area in this gel is, I would guess many hundreds of times the size, the volume of the bullet. It just it blows up everything in its path. You got to see it. The round in this case that they're studying in this autopsy, I guess I should start over. The autopsies describe bullets carving through flesh, leaving massive trauma in their wake. One victim suffered a gunshot wound to the left upper back. All right, imagine that for a minute. Left upper back. The round appeared at that point to be tumbling end over end at the moment of impact. Now, these things come out fast and spinning tightly. This means that wherever this bullet that killed this person in this autopsy enters their body tumbling end over end, likely tells us something about what's happening here, about how the gun is functioning as it happens. Here they say it's likely a sign that the gunman's weapon had begun to overheat from firing so rapidly, because of course it had a bump stock on it and was being fired in a way such that it emulates automatic fire. But you can do that just the same even without the bump stock. Not only can you fire nearly automatically, but you can fire fast enough to overheat your gun pretty quickly with an AR-15, because large capacity magazines, you fire 100 rounds in rapid succession, this is going to happen. What it does to the gun, the weapon overheats, and it, as it says here, sends the bullet on an unstable trajectory out of an expanded barrel. The heat expands the metal of the barrel when it's cool, or hasn't yet overheated, and the barrel is tight and rifled, and it sends the bullet down the rifle, spinning. Of course, that's what the rifling inside the barrel does. And it's not rattling around in a giant pipe. It's, a very narrow tube that's calibrated to the size of the round, and fires it out straight and fast. But you expand the barrel and it bumps around and comes out, wonky, and ends up tumbling end over end. And that, of course, only makes things worse. That's not a bad thing necessarily for the shooter. If you're target shooting, bad. If you are spraying bullets into a crowd, no problem. In fact, maybe even better. Because in this case, after being struck in the back The round coursed through the woman's body, ricocheting off a rib and perforating her left lung before stopping between her 8th and 9th vertebrae, where medical examiners recovered the bullet. The autopsy for the woman described at the beginning of this article shows that she was shot in the forearm. Now imagine that, right? Okay, I'm shot in the forearm. I think I can survive this. Shot in the forearm. It's bad. I don't like it. Terrible wound. Hurts a lot. Might need to rehab forever. Might even, lose use of the arm or lose the arm itself. But it's the forearm. But never fear. AR-15 is here. The bullet passed through her arm twice and then entered her body. I'm thinking that this person had their arm up at the shoulder, bent back at the elbow, as if scratching their ear, or, I doubt they were scratching the ear, trying to shield their eyes, or keep a hat from flying off their head, said Alphen, or, also very likely, covering their ears and screaming in terror and running. But that's where, that's how to envision the body position we're talking about. The bullet then coming in the forearm, and then exiting the forearm, and then going into the upper arm. You can understand that. And then, of course, even that didn't stop it. The forearm doesn't stop it. The upper arm doesn't stop it. The bullet leaves the upper arm, passes through the arm twice, and then enters the body, still with enough force that it kills her. It comes in and it tears her body apart, and she's killed. Not instantly, but she's killed. Another report describes a woman who was struck in the head. As with the other victims who suffered direct shots to the head, the impact caused instant death, Alphen said. The only good thing is that she didn't suffer. She felt no pain at all. Some of those others, even though they died with chest cavity wounds, they survived on the ground for 60 to 90 seconds. Their heart continued to beat. The blood filled up into the pleural cavity and the thoracic cavity. Their brain was still functioning, and they knew that they were dying and they were in pain. At least this poor woman, it was instant. Wounds from these military-style rifles, and that's really what the issue is here, look much different from those caused by a handgun, said Dr. Brian H. Williams, a trauma surgeon who now serves as medical director of the Parkland Community Health Institute in Dallas. Williams said that most of the gunshot wounds he's treated appear to be from handguns, but he was on duty during a July 2016 mass shooting in Dallas, in which a gunman killed 5 police officers with a semi-automatic rifle. To get a sense of a handgun shot, Williams compared the impact to what happens when you drop a rock in the water, and it makes a small splash and some ripples. Now, take the same rock, bring it up over your head, and slam it into the water. That much bigger splash with larger ripples that emanate farther illustrates the difference between a rifle round and a handgun round hitting human flesh. That's similar to what a bullet does when it enters the body, said Williams. The projectile from the military weapon that's going much faster can cause much more damage. In just 10 minutes, the Las Vegas shooter was able to fire off more than 1,100 of these rounds from his perch on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel, each one a potential death sentence. Investigators say he was outfitted with more than a dozen assault-style rifles, many of them equipped with 100-round magazines and bump stocks, aftermarket accessories, of course, that simulate automatic fire. With this sort of firepower, the gunman didn't even need to have good marksmanship or anything more than a basic understanding of his weapons. All he needed to do was pick up a loaded gun, point it towards the helpless people in the distance, and pull the trigger until it was empty, discard the spent rifle, and pick up another one, because you can bring as many as you want. At the range he was firing from, the rounds had likely lost enough speed to make them subsonic, let's get technical, when they reached their target, meaning they wouldn't have made the cracking noise a bullet makes when it breaks the sound barrier, said Alphen. As a result, the concert goers stayed tightly packed for moments before they had any idea that they were under fire. There was no hope of survival for many of those unlucky enough to be hit. These are military rounds, and they are designed to be one shot, one kill, said Dr. John Fieldes, a trauma surgeon at the University Medical Center in Las Vegas, who was on duty the night of October 1st. They do more than just bore holes through people. They tumble and they create cavities, and that tears at tissue. And as I said, to get a sense of the extent of the wounds, Phil has recommended looking at what happens when a round of this caliber passes through ballistic gel, which is meant to mimic human flesh, and you should see that for yourself. It appears that the bullets functioned as intended in many cases. Other patients ended up in the hospital with a variety of gunshot-related injuries, though many appeared not to have been struck cleanly, Phil said. And here, again, important point. This is why I'm continuing on with this. We had patients that had bullet fragments. The bullet hit somebody else and killed them. The fragment continued on and, for instance, tore blood vessels like an artery or a vein, said Fieldes. We had patients who had fragments that went into their chest and caused bleeding but didn't kill them, and they had to have a chest tube placed. We had patients who had fragments that went into the abdomen and injured their intestines, so those had to be repaired. Fieldes added that some of the fragments were traveling fast enough to puncture the chest, abdomen, or extremities, or even fracture bones. And it's possible that victims were hit by shrapnel from sources other than bullets. Now hold on a second, just to make sure that you got this. The bullets hit somebody else and kill them, and then break up. And the fragments fly out of that person's body and into somebody else's body with enough force to break bones or tear up their internal organs and kill them as well. So you're talking about people being hit and killed by bullets that have already hit and killed somebody else and then break up and fly through other people. That's the kind of weaponry we're handing out. And you need it for deer hunting. So, you got to have one of those, right? That's just to reinforce that maybe it's not really entirely necessary to have something like this after all. As we've, along the way, we've sort of lost, in some cases, lost the passion for the assault weapons ban, although, a lot of people are still on board with it because, gosh, these assault weapons keep turning up everywhere at these mass shootings, and maybe we ought to do something. But some of us are susceptible to the argument that, well, so many more of the shootings in this country are done with handguns, we should stop worrying about scary assault weapons. But this is a good reason to continue worrying about those things and why they make a difference and why they're particularly dangerous and pernicious to have circulating in such numbers in this country. So again, there's still a little bit more here. As I mentioned, it's possible that victims were hit by shrapnel from sources other than bullets. If you haven't bought into just how powerful these things are yet, you could have been standing at row 32 at the concert, and a guy off to your right at row 35, let's say, gets hit in the back. That bullet might exit his body, turn in flight, and hit you, said Alphen. Sure, right? Everyone can understand that. Or it might be tumbling in the guy's body, hit his femur or some other major bone. This is kind of gross, but you got to know about this. It might hit a femur or some other major bone, eject a bone fragment, and it hits you with the bone fragment. That's actually common, he says, in situations like this, particularly where there's a crowd. It hits you so hard that it blows pieces of your bone out the front or back, wherever, of your body and into other people with enough force that they too are in the hospital for trauma, maybe lose their lives because the fragments of your bones have been blown out the other side of your body so hard that somebody 3 rows ahead of you at the concert is hospitalized as a result. Sure, take it deer hunting. What a great idea. The woods is full of people who are out there just trying to bag a deer. I can't even tell you how many hunting accidents I reported or I found in my gun fail searches. And I think there was an extraordinarily large rash of them in my unpublished collections from November through January. Just, I feel like I got an extraordinary number. The woods are full of people wearing their blaze orange, don't shoot me, but people out there convinced that, I have an AR-15 and, after all, it's legit as a hunting weapon. I'm going to take it with me. And I wonder, I don't know if I have specific cases of this where it's reported that this is what happened, but I imagine that it probably has happened and it doesn't get reported exactly this way. It's just, well, there was a deer hunting accident. and hunter took aim at a deer. Sometimes he hits the deer, sometimes not. Sometimes the deer runs in between two hunters. I got a lot of those, and I get the result that the one hunter shot the other. And they don't tell me what happened to the deer, but if you're out there shooting with an AR-15 and a deer passes between you and your hunting partner, pretty good chance that you're going to shoot your hunting partner. And if you do, it's because you're using an overpowered. I mean, there's high-powered hunting rifles, yes, but I guess if you're really working with something overpowered like an AR-15, you could have this happen. But in a mass shooting event, it's apparently common that there's injuries from people who didn't even get hit with a bullet, not even hit with a bullet fragment. They're just hit with the exploding pieces of bodies that are blowing up around them. Over the past decade, we've seen Americans gunned down en masse at concerts, in churches, schools, movie theaters, nightclubs. We're often called upon to remember the victims who've died in those incidents, but rarely are we asked to confront the unsettling circumstances of the deaths themselves. In 2015, then California Attorney General Kamala Harris, now a U.S. Senator, argued that lawmakers should have been forced to do exactly that before voting on gun legislation after the 2012 mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. Spread out the autopsy photographs of those babies and require them to look at those photographs, Harris said, and then vote your conscience. Yeah, maybe. Feels like something that you should force on people who are otherwise in denial. But again, when it comes to getting the buy-in of the families, I don't know. Is it something you should be able to force on lawmakers in particular without the consent of the families? I got no idea. The practical applications of this and how to deal with it, just like everything else, the practical applications of everything causes problems. As liberals, I guess we deal with that. Tell me the facts about it. Tell me the logistics about it. Tell me how it actually gets done. And probably by the time our conversation is over, I say, I understand the feeling, but it's just not going to work out. And it happens in everything, even the mundane, dumb stuff like we were discussing the other day about food boxes being shipped to people. When you get down to the brass tacks of it, you realize it's just really not going to work. But the conservative mind, of course, doesn't work that way. Yeah, of course, we're going to save money. We'll outsource the whole thing, and it's going to be huge, and people are going to love it. And it's better than sending people to the store to buy crap food, only to have them waste the money and buy junk and get fat. And we'll keep them healthy by sending them good stuff. And I love the idea. It'll save money because we'll outsource it. I just want to return to that for a second. This is a good way to get off of the gun issue, I guess. It's a weird segue, but it kind of worked. But that food in a box issue, I guess I'm still not done being upset about that one, even though I don't think it's necessarily going to actually happen. But just, I guess it's so indicative of the conservative mindset that I think it's an important story. And I have another thing I've got to add to that, somebody who really knows what they're talking about on that subject, I think. Or at least makes it sound like they know what they're talking about. And that's as important as anything on a radio show. But like the idea that this was going to save money, which I guess Mick Mulvaney was pushing. And Mick Mulvaney has, let me just say again, this guy has no idea, apparently, what the hell he's talking about in any circumstances. He's, of course, the OMB director. He was in the news the other day, apparently. He's giving some preliminary estimate of like how much the Trump military parade might cost. And I think estimating somewhere between $10 and $30 million, which sounds like it might be right, might not be right. I don't know. But why we should think Mick Mulvaney has any ability to predict how much something is going to cost, I have no idea. He's standing there telling us that we're going to save money by shipping people boxes of canned goods, when the current plan is we give people money on electronic benefit transfer cards, EBT cards, reloadable or whatever. But all we're doing is electronically sending them money, and they can spend it any way they want at any store that accepts it. Well, any way they want. That's wrong. But anyway, they're permitted to, because there's lots of restrictions actually on how they're permitted to use their benefits. But basically, I guess I would just remind people, they're literally, I think, just cannot be anything cheaper. How in the world do you think you're going to do things cheaper than electronic benefit transfer cards? I have no idea. How in the world can you ship a box of anything to millions of people for less than it costs you to electronically say, poof, your card has money on it? It's not possible. For him to stand there and say that is evidence that he's unfit for the job. But, in this administration, that really doesn't matter. Whether you're, unfit for the job is just not an issue. Which brings me to, I guess, another of the stories that I'll sneak in before I get to that additional piece about the food boxes. Although maybe I ought to do the food boxes first, because really, they were here first, right? And the break's coming up, and then we can get to the big story of the fact that nobody appears to be qualified to do anything of any kind in the Trump administration, and it doesn't matter because YOLO, nothing matters, and nobody has their security clearances, and so what, because we're all spies, and really, I guess that's all there is to it. I saved this tweet storm on the food box thing from, I guess, someone I saw at random, more or less, on Twitter, from a person who tweets, the address on Twitter is Hug Wins, is what it reads. H-U-G, Hug Wins, W-I-N-S, Hug Wins. I don't know why or what it's supposed to mean, but here it is. Somebody who says, so as someone who's covered monthly food budgets with food stamps, okay, let me break a few things down for you because a lot of people haven't. That's true. I don't have experience with food stamps. I try to be empathetic to those who do. Let's listen. He's working off of Daniel Dale's tweet, actually, about this subject, which reads, shocking anti-hunger advocates the Trump administration is proposing to replace half of food stamp money, you know the story, with a box of government-selected foods they deliver monthly. A month's worth of food in a box. I can't even imagine. Canned food for a month in a box, shipped, what is that? 75, 80 pounds worth of food? How are you going to ship that for less? You couldn't ship one can to people per month for less than it costs to just recharge EBT cards. They'd call it a harvest box, even though it wouldn't include anything fresh. And then they decided to call it Blue Apron. Well, anyway. Okay. Food Stamps, Hugwins, whose real name is Chris, tells us food stamps are incredibly limited. What I had to work with was a bit over $100. This is some of the interesting stuff. This is where you get into the bureaucracy stuff. And even conservatives would say, that's crazy, stupid bureaucracy. But then you have to realize how you got these stupid bureaucratic rules in the first place. And it's mostly because somebody saw somebody at a supermarket buying something that looked a little too luxurious from their point of view for a poor person who's on food stamps to be allowed to buy. And they called Rush Limbaugh and said so on the radio, and Rush Limbaugh said, that's ridiculous, we're giving people filet mignon. And then voila, suddenly a restriction. Food stamps are incredibly limited. This person had over $100, just a little over $100 to work with. Now, here's some of the restrictions. No hot food, no prepared food. Right? You see somebody doing it. Well, there's people, they could make a thing, blah, blah, blah. They're buying prepared food and it's junk and it's terrible. And you could, for so much less, with just a little bit of skill, just buy the ingredients and cook it. You should be saving money, and it's ridiculous for people to be buying prepared foods. But reality check, just for a second here, as Chris tells us, even though, let's say, and here's it, easy to figure this out. You've seen it. Rotisserie chicken. Okay, go to the store, you go to the supermarket, they got prepared rotisserie chickens there. Pretty similar in price and sometimes even less than raw roaster chickens. But because they're prepared foods, off limits. Your food stamps EBT, you cannot use it for the rotisserie chicken. You'll get to the store, a raw Purdue oven stuffer roaster chicken will be staring at you from the refrigerator bin there at $6.99 a pound or whatever, but $4.99 on special for a rotisserie chicken. Feed your family. You've been out working all day, maybe more than one job. right? You're exhausted from the day. The kids are hungry and starving. You want to feed them something good, some nice protein, chicken. That's cheap. Let's do it. But it's 7 o'clock already. I just picked you up from, your after-school care, if I managed to get that, or just came in from my second job. We're starving, and I've got a roaster chicken. 2 hours until dinner, kids. You want protein, right? Couldn't buy you the hot chicken, because Rush Limbaugh said I shouldn't. Too luxurious. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring, monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. When we left off, we were reading through the tweet storm of Chris Hugwins, Chris, his real name, on Twitter about his experience in dealing with food stamps and what some of the problems might be, not only in dealing with life on food stamps, but if they switched up the program, as the Trump administration maybe sort of kind of now proposes, to subtract 1/2 of the electronic benefits and replace it with a box full of food for the month, which God only knows what they're planning to send on this. And now Michael Musson makes the comment, and I've missed a lot of comments from everybody today, and I'm sorry I kind of went freewheeling on it, but he asks, have people forgotten the food stamp challenges? Yes, I think they have, largely. And then he makes this point. If the box contained 1 month's balanced meals, it would be a substantial increase in the benefit. It could be. It could be a substantial increase in the benefit. Now, why anybody would believe that Donald Trump would, in fact, substantially increase the benefit, I have no idea. What you're, of course, much more likely to see is what you're seeing right now when the government says, oh, people are hungry in Puerto Rico. Let us send them boxes of food. And what wonderful boxes of food are we sending? It's been an effing disaster on top of a disaster. They're sending people boxes of Doritos and Skittles and Baby Ruth candy bars with a can of Vienna sausages in it. And tell me that that's a more balanced meal. That's like one meal. I don't even know what it would cost to ship somebody a month's worth of canned goods. Again, I have no idea what that would weigh, and I'm starting to think that you're talking about like 75 plus pounds of, and who determines what goes in it and on what basis, all of these things, of course, beyond the thinking of any, they'll complain, well, you're killing this idea in its infancy. We haven't had a chance to work things out yet. Obviously, we would work out the logistics, and I'm sure that they would eventually. But, how far into the project do they decide that the whole thing is unworkable versus I'm telling you right now it's not going to work. I'm going to save you a lot of money and a lot of time. But so many things can go wrong with it, and a lot of them are brought up in this thread. But, the reality of it is, like I said, that we see what they're doing with Puerto Rico. So when I say I'm going to send you a month's worth of food, like right now, what does that mean? And think about how things work in government contracting world, right? What is there going to be a caloric minimum in all of this? Does it count if I send you 400 cans of lima beans? You could eat that all month, and it's better than Doritos. But that brings us back to the question: so why do people spend their electronic benefits on junk? Like, well, either Doritos or God help you if Rush Limbaugh sees you buy a prepared chicken, right? That can't happen. Or other stupid items like, these people on food stamps, we're trying to keep them alive. give them the basics for just good, nutritious food. I mean, what the hell's wrong with these people? They go and they buy junk, and they're all fat and overweight, too, and it's their fault. And, you know, I see these people out there at the supermarket, and they're huge, and they're buying all kinds of junk. Well, this is part of this is explained, I think, in this thread. I'll just go on with this, and you'll begin to get a flavor for what is going on here. Food stamps, as we says, are incredibly limited, Chris writes. No prepared food, no hot food. So even though a rotisserie chicken, pretty similar in price to raw roaster chickens, they're off limits. And of course, it's just food, not anything you need to buy at a grocery store in general. To quote M, goddamn food stamps don't buy diapers. Okay. True. So no toilet paper, no diapers, no toothpaste, no shampoo. Stuff, we'll edit, stuff you absolutely do need and can't effectively get by without. So food stamps as is are already lacking. But okay, it can't solve every problem, right? What about this, though? Meal boxes selected by a government agency. Okay, well, this observation. Look, people know how to cook what they know how to cook. That doesn't solve the problem, right? You know, I sent you this nutritious food. I don't know what to do with it. I've never seen it. I don't like it. My kids won't eat it. I'm allergic to it. Think of all the things that go wrong with this thing. I'm going to send you nutritious food. Are you going to teach me how to cook it? No, you're going to have to figure it out yourself. Look it up on the internet that you don't have, right? Cook it in the appliance you don't have. Who knows what they're going to do with this stuff? People know how to cook what they know how to cook. We might want to change that, but this is what they know. If you want to change it, again, enormous expense likely to be attached to this. But there's going to be big savings. People know how to cook what they know how to cook. And they know what their families will and won't eat. Try convincing a toddler that the government is making them eat a certain diet and actually getting the kid to eat it. That is difficult, of course. Deal with an adult, you can still have problems. They know what people in their family are allergic to or have dietary restrictions for. From the sound of things in this article, that hasn't been addressed at all. Admittedly, it's early stages, but I don't trust that these people are going to be able to get their heads around the late stages either. And that isn't even starting to get into that this plan doesn't include any fresh food. There is an incredible amount of shaming of people in this country for eating junk when on food stamps, as though we don't subsidize the components of the junk such that it costs way less than fresh food. Here is a problem. And then it's, why are poor people so gross and unhealthy? When fresh food is financially out of reach and no one has any spare time to devote to full night's sleep or exercise, much less the preparation that this fresh food would actually require, that's not going to get better with cost-cutting delivery box situations. And again, giving people a box of random stuff assumes they know how to cook everything in it, which isn't a given. That they have access to a stove, which isn't a given. Weekly motels, for instance, where people often stay when homeless, they don't have access to that very often. And they don't, this assumes, have any dietary restrictions, which they may very well have. This also assumes that their kids will eat everything put in front of them. Beggars can't be choosers. That's what it says in the book of Proverbs here. So you got to eat this, kids. Well, it ain't working in real life. Now, this is especially an issue for kids with dietary restrictions of their own, or things like texture issues with autism, or just picky kids. This donate cans to the food drive that are the cans you don't want to eat sort of food policy here. My mom, Chris writes, always made us go get cans or boxed food that could be assembled into a coherent meal because she'd been there. Most kids around us donated spinach and green beans and felt virtuous about it. Food stamps are grossly inadequate for providing families and do not cover non-food essentials that you would get in a grocery trip, and other programs don't really either. But this is a goddamn mess. People know what their families need. People know what they know how to prepare and what their kids will eat. And by the way, just for a short aside here, right? Note that the plan is to cut half of the benefits away from the EBT card and send people cans, which might be for their own good. I'm sure that's the thought here. But in the meantime, we're block granting everything else under the sun, under the theory that if we just give people the money and move it to local authorities or localize things as much as possible, people will be empowered. They know what they want to do. They know what they can do. They know what they are capable of doing. Let them do it in the most flexible way possible. Unless they're poor or brown, in which case we'll tell them what they got to eat and when they're going to get it. So think about that just for a little bit. People know what they know how to prepare, they know what their kids will eat. This BS infantilizing nonsense of an idea where you just toss stuff at poor people is only useful if you want poor people to suffer. Probably in this administration they do. And for that matter, sorry, I'm still mad about this concept. Do you all understand what hunger looks like in this country? Do you actually? I've seen it. I don't know if you have. Go work in a school that's been written off as not good enough, and you'll see it real quick. Or date someone who's on food stamps and can't contribute to the rent when he moves in with you, but can offer up his food stamps. Hunger in this country rarely looks like the charity commercials you see on TV. What we have here is food insecurity and a huge amount of malnutrition. Again, our junk here is cheap, but junk has calories. It's just, that's all it has. When I was a kid, Chris writes, we had $10 in the bank and $20,000 in credit card debt, and my mom hid it from us as best she could, but she explained some things. One of those things was this country's form of calorie to expenditure economizing. Do you know what the cheapest things you can get is if you are trying to maximize calories? In the U.S., that is, because that's how our subsidies work. Cake mix. In a cruel sort of twist, we really can let them eat cake. Cake mixes are generally under $1. Eggs are under $1. Oil is usually about 60 cents in a medium-sized bottle. A cake is about 4,000 calories. If you have next to no money and literally need to have at least enough calories to live, to work, let's say you're working 2 jobs, probably manual labor, you actually need to eat for the calories so that you can burn those calories and do the work to live to the next day. If you need just enough calories to live and you have just enough money to get by, you're eating cake. And particularly in food deserts or areas where Walmart has driven out all the local grocery options, the other cheapest things are soda and chips. A lot of that has to do with the corn lobby's power. That's worth thinking about. And the end result is that the cheapest possible things to eat, if you are at desperation point, have next to no nutritional value. Having been there, anytime someone goes, but produce is cheap, I want to punch them in the face. I don't know if I recommend it, but I can understand the feeling. The first priority as an animal is getting enough calories to live. Everything else becomes secondary until you have fulfilled that requirement. So sure, you can buy a head of lettuce for, say, $1.50. That head of lettuce does almost nothing to get you enough base fuel to get by. When people scoff at poor people in this country, oh, they're not really starving. Look at them, they're fat. What you are seeing is people trying to get enough calories from any source to live, who are at the same time withering with malnutrition. Sometimes having to wait a good long while between meals, and when they got those meals, they had no nutritive value, for that matter, and your body understands starvation mode and stores accordingly. This country's approach to food and poverty is shameful. You cannot pretend a bag of chips and a bag of apples being the same price in a store, even if they are, and they often aren't, means people are just making bad choices. A bag of apples doesn't have enough calories. That's the baseline. When you are in a place where it's eat food that gives you no vitamins, no protein, no micronutrients, etc., or eat food that doesn't give you enough basic breakdown of glucose to get your body through another day, you do not have the luxury to be healthy. Just be healthy. Make healthy choices. I guess that could be a problem. If we gave a crap about health, actually gave a crap, we would make fresh produce free on food stamps. Not that that would help people in food deserts much, or people who don't have time to cook the stuff either, right? Kids are in school. They may be working after school if they're old enough. You're working 2 jobs. You get home with your fresh chicken and fresh vegetables, and it's 7:30. What are you going to do? But okay, not that that would help people in food deserts where the food isn't even available, or where you have 1 or 2 things at the convenience store at best. But it would be a start. As it is, we screw people over by design and then lecture them when they take the options most available and pragmatic to them. And then cut their benefits because they're not conforming to our standards. So this idea of canned food drive by delivery as a way to deliver food stamps can go straight to hell. We already punish poor people enough in the way we have designed our system without making it worse. I thought, well, that makes some very interesting points. I can't tell you from first-hand experience whether they're really true and hold water in all cases, but it sounds pretty plausible to me and like maybe something to consider in all of this, and worth keeping in mind when we're maybe designing a program of sending people boxes of food, which, I mean, just on its face is just fallacious and stupid. There's no, one more time, there's no possible way. It is impossible. No, I don't care what kind of deal you get on canned goods. I don't care what kind of deal you get on shipping. There's no way you're going to be able to get a month's worth of food to everybody who's on food stamps cheaper than handing over EBT cards. And I know maybe you have a different goal in mind, and that would be fine. Then 1, stop selling it as cheap or as savings. It isn't. And 2, if you're really going to parent everybody who's on food stamps, you're going to have to do a lot more than just deliver them what you think is good food in a can. You're going to have to teach people how to cook it, how to combine it, how to do it. How can you make it fit into your life and work for you? And why should you not be spending your money on cakes in the meantime? And can we do anything to make it possible for you not to do that? That's a lot of work. I don't think it's coming in a box anytime soon. But by the way, I mean, it's just logistics of packing those boxes, like I said. I mean, I couldn't even tell you. The logistics of this whole thing are ridiculous. I don't know whether they plan on building a parallel infrastructure. It's infrastructure week again. In order to do this. But I mean, really, honestly, just do the math on how many people are getting these things. How much food are they getting? How much canned goods do you have to put in a box to hold somebody for a month? Assuming they eat 100% of everything you give them and waste nothing. Still, how much do you have to put, and on what basis are you putting it in there? Is the base number of calories the issue? Is it balance that's the issue? Is it whatever we can get for cheap is the issue? I mean, what if there really is no variety in it? But there are other logistical issues. You know, who's going to pack the things? You could outsource the whole thing and say, well, we'll just let private companies do it, in which case, of course, it becomes an opportunity for graft. But okay, that was probably to be expected in the Trump administration. But what sort of infrastructure might we do? If you really wanted to save some money in all of it, I mean, it would still cost more than the EBT cards. But I guess you could say, well, there's already an existing private infrastructure for gathering, packing, and distributing throughout the country canned goods, canned foods to every corner of the country. Of course, that is called supermarkets, and it doesn't reach every corner, certainly, but it reaches an awful lot of this country. And, well, I mean, why would it be cheaper to, in addition to stocking the shelves of supermarkets around the country, also asking those companies to pack some of their stuff in boxes and then deliver it to wherever food stamp recipients might be living at the time, even if they have no fixed address, as opposed to put it on your shelf, and we're going to give electronic benefit cards to those people, and they'll find you and they will buy, hopefully, those canned goods off the shelf from you. But they're not actually doing it, and so whatever. I don't know. That won't save any money. And then, by the way, just to get even further into the stupid logistics of it, does everybody realize this? I didn't really register this, but my wife happens to work in an industry related, not to food stamps or anything, but to delivery, to shipping. Do we know that there is an extraordinary trucking shortage in the country? Not to mention the fuel costs to go along with it, but the idea that you're going to be able to divert enough trucking capacity to this stupid program when we're already at capacity, already moving those same stupid cans that we want to put in a box much more efficiently along with the rest of the cans going to the supermarkets and being put on supermarket shelves at no expense to us as taxpayers. We're underwriting it and the prices we're paying for the groceries. But to divert some percentage of that to a warehouse somewhere else where it's going to be packed in a box and sent to people who don't want it, I don't know. I don't think it's going to work out. But maybe I'll stop on it because we're getting close to the end of the show. And Mark Hogue pointing out here for us, isn't the whole box of food versus food stamps a diversion? Like conservatives already don't have enough bad ideas ready to go. In that sense, sure. I mean, it's all a diversion. Is it a diversion from what? And I don't know. I could pick another subject. This is not your fault, Mark. You haven't said anything invalid. It is a diversion. But let's see, I could reach into pocket here and pull out something else and find out that that's a diversion from some other thing. Like, for instance, the NBC News report yesterday that when you really look down deep at what's going on in the White House with their stupid security clearances, is we had a third person resign from the White House yesterday also over their inability to get a permanent security clearance. Who was it? I don't even remember. The Hill has that report. Let me just quickly flip over to that one. A third person had to take leave of the White House. A top official on the National Economic Council has reportedly resigned after being told that he did not qualify for a full security clearance. George David Banks, Special Assistant to the President for International Energy and Environmental Policy, resigned Tuesday after the White House counsel's office informed him that he would not be granted a full security clearance because he admitted to smoking marijuana in 2013. Except he smoked so much, he's still high, presumably. And that's how he ended up taking the job in the Trump administration. I think it's probably worn off by now, but there you have it. That doesn't seem like a particularly good reason to deny anybody a security clearance. But don't worry, that's not the real story. The real story is that there are, as NBC reports, scores of top White House officials lacking permanent security clearances. In fact, more than 130 political appointees working at the executive office of the president did not have permanent security clearances as of November 2017, including the president's daughter, Ivanka, son-in-law, Jared, and his top legal counsel, Don McGahn, dealing with all of this Trump-Russia stuff and has no security clearance. This, according to internal White House documents obtained by NBC News, which you can obtain very easily, probably just by strolling in there and picking up a copy of anything you want, because what the hell, nobody here has any security clearance. Take what you like, I guess, is probably their approach to things. And how would you know even if it wasn't? Because there's no reporting of these things. We've got to stop the auto-playing video from NBC. Of those appointees working with interim clearances, 47, they report, 47 of them are in positions that report directly to President Donald Trump. About a quarter of all political appointees in the executive office are working with some form of interim security clearance. White House officials said Wednesday they would not comment, as it is their policy, on the nature of security clearances. CNN also reported on the clearances earlier Wednesday evening. It's unclear whether some employees have had their clearance levels changed since mid-November. Anyway, we find out one by one all these people, and the fact that they don't have permanent security clearances, and we talked a little bit about why that was and how Jared Kushner had a temporary one, and if they revoked all of them, then they'd have to revoke his too. So they just left this mess in place. And it's amazing. 100 and something people walking around the White House with access to classified information. And, no hope of getting a security clearance at all. Now, it reminds me, and I have to dig some of this up, and I wasn't able to grab it right away because the news pages are saturated with the current stories. But didn't we read, I know we read on the show, didn't we read back in, January, February, March of last year? Wasn't there a rash of people leaving the White House at lower levels because they couldn't get security clearances? My recollection is that there was somebody who was the daughter of a muckety-muck in the Florida Republican Party. Florida, once again, chiming in. And she had to leave the White House. She may have gone to another executive department. But again, the issue was can't get a security clearance. And we just sort of brushed it off like, well, low-level functionary, who knows what they've got in their background, maybe a DUI or something, and that spoiled it. Now we find out the place is rife with it. And what interests me is what was it that made the people back in the beginning of last year get expunged from the White House, whereas people just worked on temporary extensions of their security clearance for a full year at other levels. And I guess, some people are important and some people aren't. But you'd be amazed at how many people are working there that have no security clearance and who are still there, who have no hope of ever getting them. I mean, Jared Kushner's done with the security clearance. It's never coming. White House officials who are listed, according to the NBC article here, as not having permanent security clearances as recently as this past November include Ivanka, Jared, Dan Scavino, the president's director of social media, Christopher Liddell, assistant to the president for strategic initiatives, and there's more and more. Don McGahn, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Raj Shah. Just kind of skimming through the article here, more and more names being brought up. Other prominent NSC members, National Security Council members, operating on interim clearances. National Security. Dina Powell never got one. She's gone now. Nadia Shadlow, I don't even know who that is, joined the White House in March of 2017, still on an interim clearance in mid-November. Fiona Hill, the NSC's Senior Director for European and Russian Affairs. Why would you need a clearance for that? Kevin Harrington, NSC's Director for Strategic Planning. John Rader, Special Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs. Joshua Steinman, NSC's Senior Director for International Cybersecurity. Who cares, right? Don't need any kind of clearance. We'll just wing it. This dotard dilettante of a president doesn't give a goddamn one way or the other, but never mind all of that. Yeah, I know. But her emails, it was literally the whole campaign was run on Hillary Clinton is careless with national security material. I'm worse, but we figured you would be. So I guess, I don't know. We got nothing to say about that. Man, it's time to wrap up. We'll be back on Friday. We can do some more of this stuff. Of course, it's time to hand the microphone over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I'm sure that there are a million stories that we have missed that he'll get to. That's one of the primary functions of having more than one show on a channel like this. There's lots to get to. There's more people who are being, their corruption is being uncovered. I guess the biggest news that I didn't cover from the last day or two, and I'm behind on revelations of particular corruption from particular members of the cabinet or maybe sub-cabinet stuff of late, but everyone would have seen this one. The latest of the cabinet secretaries to show up in the corruption game, the VA, the Secretary for Veterans Affairs, Shulkin, in the news for what? A trip to England, to Europe, really. There's a full story in Politico that included a side trip to fabulous Wimbledon with some terrific tennis tickets to take in the big tournament there. And I guess the real, I don't know what you would say, the jackpot of this one was apparently staffers for the secretary were tinkering with and changing the wording of emails that had to be turned over to the inspectors general in order to find out whether anything had gone wrong here. They basically changed the wording of emails planning for the trip such that the ethics officers were willing to approve the expenditures when they were really lying about what they were going to Europe for in the first place. We'll get into the details of it tomorrow. There are many more such things going on here. And, oh, yes, one little item that I opened up early, I think even before the show, that I didn't even get a chance to discuss. It's like almost like you can't even make this stuff up here at this point. Apparently, over at the EPA, where Scott Pruitt is constantly under investigation, the Inspector General there is saying, we're running out of budget to investigate this guy. That's how bad he really is. Man, I ate up more time with that. I'll try and squeeze in the highlights of what's coming next after this.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Here you go. Mick Mulvaney has got his estimate for the military parade, putting it at about $30 million. That, by the way, would fund SNAP for 24,000 people for a year, but instead you should eat whatever we give you in this box. Look at this. A Russian citizen gets 12 years in a U.S. prison for his role in a wide-ranging hacking scheme. We'll have to check in on this and much, much more with Justice next.